He turned and stood studying the countryside. There was a heavy leather document case standing upright alongside the dead man's knee, and Moss absolutely knew what was in the case, and he was scared in a way that he didn't even understand. When he finally picked it up, he just walked out a little ways and sat down in the grass and slid the rifle off his shoulder and laid it aside. He sat with his legs spaced and the H&K in his lap and the case standing between his knees. Then he reached and unbuckled the two straps and unsnapped the brass latch and lifted the flap and folded it back. It was level full of $100 banknotes. They were in packets fastened with bank tape, stamped each with the denomination $10,000. He didn't know what it added up to, but he had a pretty good idea. He sat there looking at it, and then he closed the flap and sat with his head down. His whole life was sitting there in front of him, day after day, from dawn till dark, until he was dead. All of it cooked down into 40 pounds of paper in a satchel. He raised his head and looked out across the Bahada. A light wind from the north. Cool, sunny. 1:00 in the afternoon. He looked at the man lying dead in the grass, his good crocodile boots that were filled with blood and turning black. The end of his life. Here in this place. The distant mountains to the south. The wind in the grass. The quiet. He latched the case and fastened the straps, and buckled them, and rose and shouldered the rifle, and then picked up the case and the machine pistol, and took his bearings by his shadow, and set out. He thought he knew how to get to his truck, and he also thought about wandering through the desert in the dark. There were Mojave rattlesnakes in that country, and if he got bit out here at night, he would in all likelihood be joining the other members of the party, and the document case and its contents would then pass on to some other owner. Weighed against these considerations was the problem of crossing open ground in broad daylight, on foot, with a fully automatic weapon slung across one shoulder and carrying a satchel containing several $1 million. Beyond all this was the dead certainty that someone was going to come looking for the money. Maybe several someones. He thought about going back and getting the shotgun with the drum magazine. He was a strong believer in the shotgun. He even thought about leaving the machine pistol behind. It was a penitentiary offense to own one. He didn't leave anything behind, and he didn't go back to the trucks. He set out across country, cutting through the gaps in the volcanic ridges and crossing the flat or rolling country between. Until late in the day, he reached the ranch road he'd come down that morning in the dark so long ago. Then in about a mile he came to the truck. He opened the door and stood the rifle in the floor. He went around and opened the driver door and pushed the lever and slid the seat forward and set the case and the machine pistol behind it. He laid the .45 and the binoculars in the seat and climbed in and pushed the seat back as far as it would go and put the key in the ignition. Then he took off his hat and leaned back and just rested his head against the cold glass behind him and closed his eyes. When he got to the highway, he slowed and rattled over the bars of the cattle guard and then pulled out onto the blacktop and turned on the headlights. He drove west toward Sanderson, and he kept to the speed limit every mile of the way. He stopped at the gas station on the east end of town for cigarettes and a long drink of water, and then drove on to the Desert Ira and pulled up in front of the trailer and shut off the motor. The lights were on inside. "You live to be 100, he said, "and there won't be another day like this one." As soon as he said it, he was sorry. He got his flashlight from the glove box and climbed out and took the machine, pistol and the case from behind the seat and crawled up under the trailer. He lay there in the dirt, looking up at the underside of it. Cheap plastic pipe and plywood, bits of insulation. He wedged the H&K up into a corner and pulled the insulation down over it and lay there thinking. Then he crawled back out with the case and dusted himself off and climbed the steps and went in. She was sprawled across the sofa, watching TV and drinking a Coke. She didn't even look up. 3:00, she said. "I can come back later." She looked at him over the back of the sofa and looked at the television again. "What have you got in that satchel?" "It's full of money." "Yeah, that'll be the day." He went into the kitchen and got a beer out of the refrigerator. "Can I have the keys?" she said. "Where you going?" "Get some cigarettes." "Cigarettes?" "Yes, Lou Whelan. Cigarettes. I've been setting here all day." "What about cyanide? How are we fixed for that?" "Just let me have the keys. I'll set out in the damn yard and smoke."